All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. This version of our Operation Summer Series is going to be law enforcement operations, specifically the Drones as First Responder program that Chula Vista is running out of California. We've got with us some folks from over there, Captain Vern Sally, Patrol Operations Captain from Chula Vista. Vern, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Justin. My name is Vern Sally. I'm the Patrol Operations Captain for Chula Vista PD. And I've been on with Chula Vista PD for 24 and a half years. Been a captain for about 5.5 years. Started our drone program back in 2016 initially, and then, of course, Drone as a First Responder officially launched in October of 2018. And look forward to discussing our program with everyone.
Thanks, Vern. We also have over from Motorola, Gopal. Gopal, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thanks, Justin. Hello, everyone. My name is Gopal Rajaraman. I've been with Motorola Solutions for more than 22 years, most of it on the software engineering side. And then I did venture capital for Motorola Solutions for 6 years, investing in startup companies. And now I'm head of our aerial suite business, which is our small UAV software group or drone software group under Emerging Solutions Group. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, of course. And of course, Lieutenant Redmond out of Chula Vista as well.
Thanks, Justin. My name's Lieutenant Don Redmond. I am a lieutenant with the Chula Vista Police Department. I've been employed here for about 23 years, almost 24 now. Currently, I oversee and manage our UAS program, which includes our Drone as a First Responder and our tactical drone deployments.
Awesome. Thank you, Lieutenant. Of course, my name is Justin Swartz. I work in business development for FLYMOTION. You know, what we're trying to do with this Operation Summer Series is just bring emerging policies and different programs to your attention and you know, programs that have been successful in the industry. So that's what we're really trying to highlight today is what Chula Vista has done with the assistance of Motorola and bring that program to you. We'll go ahead and start off here. Captain, if you would, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks, Justin. So just to set up some context for our listeners, if you've never heard of Chula Vista, we're a suburb of San Diego, California. We're the second largest city in the county. We have about 270,000 folks that live here, 52 square miles, so a fairly large city. I basically call it a bedroom community to the city of San Diego. So not a lot of really tall buildings. I think our tallest building is about 15 stories. But that's the exception versus the norm. On average, everything is below 5 stories, and most things are well below that. We have actually about 54 sworn officers right now, and we do not have a helicopter unit and never have. And so we have always relied on mutual aid from the city of San Diego and the sheriff's department for our air support. And, you know, they're fantastic partners. But, you know, as I think you'll see from this presentation, we've really started to take our own destiny into our hands with our Drone as a First Responder program. So one of the things that we view is that traditional drone use by police agencies tends to be reactive. And what we mean by that is traditional deployment is you know, you receive a call, the patrol officer drives to the scene and deploys a drone from the trunk manually. And that's a slower response. And sometimes that cop might be the last one on scene as you call for that resource. It's manual, handheld flight subject to human error and the inconsistent skills amongst different pilots. The first responder, that's the cop that's the UAS pilot, rather than using their primary skill as a police officer, which we really do need on the scene, you know, we're using a first responder as a pilot rather than their primary skill sets. And so that's problematic as well. Also, when you're on the ground at a scene, everybody knows that there's problems with obstacles, maintaining visual line of sight, limited range for that flight of about a half mile to a mile visually. So in summary, it's really highly localized and lacking quite a bit of situational awareness. And it also is challenging to distribute the video to other stakeholders and supervisors, although that's also starting to change with technology as well. So the solution that we really started thinking about back in 2018 is, what is that problem? Is how do we routinely deliver decision quality data, which is live video, to first responders before they arrive on scene for better situational awareness? We don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive. We want to have pre-event intelligence as best we can. So we developed this concept of drone as a first responder as our solution. And what that looks like is a drone is continuously available to respond within a geofenced area within the operational area that we intend to have. We have an experienced teleoperator, which is within the station, that operates the UAS and a camera and coordinates resources and tactics via radio. We have the ability to widely distribute live video to first responders, supervisors, and managers. We can add strategic launch sites to improve response times and drone support. Using the technology that Gopal will discuss in his section, we use automation and geofencing for increased flight safety. And it allows our first responders, our cops on the ground, to focus on the incident and not focus on flight safety. It allows them to do their highest level work as police officers and not worry about being a pilot and worrying about a drone and other aircraft in the area. So drone, as I mentioned, drone as a first responder is proactive. It's prepared to respond immediately to any emergency within the geofenced flight area. It's operated by the teleoperator, and we do use an experienced sworn officer as a teleoperator. And the reason for that is they essentially become an incident commander. The drone teleoperator has years of experience, knows all policies, procedures, response protocols, tactics, and literally as they operate the flight of the drone, the camera gimbal, the zoom, they're able to actually use their experience to gain information and share that live on the air in real time with the officers and dispatchers and coordinate the call, very similar to how a manned helicopter observer would. The flight safety is ensured by automation, geofencing, and a visual observer pick at the launch site, pilot in command at the launch site. Of course, in the future, we believe that automation and better situational awareness and airspace awareness will hopefully eliminate the need for a pilot in command, but that's not the reality under current FAA regulations. We do have an operational radius of 3 nautical miles from the launch site, and I'll discuss that. That's actually a waiver from the FAA that we got about 6 months into our program. We have 2 launch sites right now, but we envision that we can have up to 5 or 6 launch sites within the city. So the teleoperator can choose between those 2 launch sites closest to the incident to respond from. And using that, we typically will get on scene in about 2.5 minutes to start feeding live video to our officers. The teleoperator has a police radio with them, and they can assist with coordination via radio and support. And often officers actually ask the teleoperator to zoom in or to change the perspective so that they can better understand the situation that they're going into. And again, the video can be distributed to up to 50 mobile devices. All of our police officers have mobile phones with them or their mobile data computers. And as we run missions, supervisors, officers, and managers will watch these live. And so it really gives people throughout the organization great situational awareness as to what's going out. So with regard to beyond visual line of sight, before we had the BVLOS waiver from the FAA, we were limited to 1 nautical mile radius around the headquarters launch site. That's because after 1 nautical mile, we really couldn't see the drone anymore. But in March 2019, we were awarded the first public safety FAA COA over an urban area with the BVLOS provision. It really vastly increased our operational area up to 3 nautical miles. We still do have visual observers for airspace awareness. Clearly, out to 3 miles, we can't see other drones per se, but we do use other techniques and technologies to be aware of what's in the air, as well as we've trained all of our patrol officers to be visual observers, so that when the drone is up in the area, they are also part of the safety protocol for airspace awareness and flight safety. And also, we're working with tech partners on further airspace awareness solutions and further automation. In the future, we really hope that technology companies such as Motorola and others will come online with automation that would pass the standards for the FAA to actually eliminate having to have a pilot in command on the roof. So this is a video, go ahead and play it, Justin, of what it looks like in action. Great, thank you. And so just to close this portion out, we really do consider drone as a first responder as really a new model for law enforcement. It's proactive versus reactive. It's integrated into our emergency response operations. We use it on routine calls, not just priority calls. We use it on calls where we would never call for a police helicopter, but those calls often could go sideways. For instance, mental health calls or domestic violence calls. We can routinely send the drone, and it gives us real-time information. It's got fewer limitations than normal Part 107 flights, as well as greater impact potential. There's a focus on telepresence and sharing intelligence. We do like to emphasize this does not replace officers on the ground, but it enhances what they're able to do. And it's a far lower cost option for agencies without traditional manned air support units. As I close this portion out, what I want the listeners to think about is, everything that's been going on in the national conversation over the last several weeks after Atlanta and after Minneapolis. It's more important now than ever that police officers responding to situations have as much intelligence as they can regarding what they're getting into, so that they can bring to bear the right tactics and resources. And I think, as Don will also cover, we're actually able to clear a large portion, about 23% of our calls we can clear without actually sending ground units, and he can cover what that might look like on different calls. But thank you very much for listening to this portion. I look forward to answering questions at the end, and I will pass it over to Gopal, I believe.
Vern, thank you so much for going over that. Like he said, there is a questions portion of your webinar portal there. Feel free to write any questions in there as we go through this webinar, and we'll have some time at the end to get those answered for you. This is also being recorded as well, so if you're only able to join us for a little while or listening via phone, you'll be able to go back and watch this on our YouTube channel hopefully tomorrow. But I will go ahead and transfer it over to Gopal as he goes into the software side.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. My name is Gopal Rajaraman, and you might have seen the name CAPE before on the slides before, and CAPE was actually the startup company that was working with Chula Vista when they started the DFR program and created the technology for aerial telepresence. We acquired the CAPE technology late last year, and we have rebranded that as Motorola Solutions Aerial Suite. And so what this is all about is how we take the aerial suite and then and I'll go through what our vision is, right? Like Vern mentioned, you can have helicopters, but they are really unaffordable by a majority of public safety agencies. They rely mainly on patrol units, and again, they should be really reserved for critical resources because they are resource intensive and expensive, right? With the aerial suite, what our aim is to how do we bring about a cost-effective first eyes on scene solution, and as Vern has mentioned, it has been proven to be really effective for public safety to reduce their operational expenses. And what we see in the future is actually more of automation, like solutions such as drone in a box, where a lot of the operational costs is close to zero, and as technology advances and as regulations permit, you could have these first eyes on scene cost-effective solutions that can greatly enhance operations and provide tools for the safety of the entire community. And this is again kind of a repeat of what Vern mentioned before, right? Today, most of the drone deployments are manual, disconnected, and reactionary, right? Drones are brought onto the scene and they are flown at the scene, right? And their video is available only with the drone operator screen. With the aerial suite, it's more of a semi-autonomous operation. It's a connected operations, and it's a proactive operation. Drones can be flown by just dropping a pin on the map and then say fly here, and the drone takes off from the rooftop of a police station or a fire station. In the future, it can be all in a box, right? And it's a connected operation. The drone video is streamed in real time to remote users, and remote users can safely fly the drone remotely. And it's all about the workflow too, right? We don't see the drone operations as a standalone operation, but it's really connected and tied into the existing public safety workflows. So, and I'll go into that a little bit later. So before I go into that, the use cases, right? The drone as a first responder is a game-changing paradigm use case started by Chula Vista, right? And they use it for responding to 911 calls, right? And as you can go to the website and see, and Don will describe later, they have a lot of metrics for how successful and effective that this program has been. But it can be used for other use cases as well, like for fire and so on, right? If you have a fire spotted in a rooftop of a remote mountain or something, you could deploy a drone and get eyes on scene first. The solution can be used for also supporting natural disasters and other use cases. We are seeing that this first eyes on scene can be used for a variety of use cases. So what does the aerial suite contain, right? It has typically three main components. One is the aerial pilot, which is a smartphone tablet client for iOS. And this is the client that's integrated with the drone SDKs and talks to the drone. And this is used by the pick in command or person in command on the rooftop, and they configure the geofence. They set all the obstacles so that the drone can avoid all the obstacles and have a safe operation. It has all the intelligence to ensure a safe and effective operation and comply with all regulations. And the pilot app is also the one that really connects the drone to the internet. And that's where the aerial command app comes in, which is a web-based client portal with full command center capabilities. The telepresence operation is established to the aerial command app, and the remote teleoperator can send control signals, can zoom in, zoom out the camera, also return the drone safely at any time during the operation. Then lastly, we have the Aerial Watch app, which is again a smartphone tablet client for iOS and Android, where anybody can securely view drone video feeds. They get alerts whenever a feed is available, and think of this as a client that can be used by a police officer on the way to a scene, right? Or either on their smartphones or on the MDTs, so that they can get additional situational awareness as they approach the scene. I wanted to talk a little bit more on the workflow piece of it, and what our vision for this is. We think of the drone software as custom software, which is customized for a public safety user experience, right? We aim to be drone agnostic and integrate with all of the top tier drones that are used by public safety customers, and we are really driven by customer demand in this aspect. And our aerial suite is kind of a middleware or layer on top of the drone hardware, right? Where we bring about advanced flight controls and payload controls, and have a lot of the safety features, such as creating geofences beyond which the drone is not allowed to go, create obstacles to avoid obstacles. And we are also working with drones that have collision avoidance features built in, so that it's a much more smoother operation. Drones that have video analytic capabilities and so on, so that we can integrate with other analytics assets that Motorola Solutions has in terms of license plate recognition and so on. And in the future, we are also planning to integrate with other workflow applications, command center software that Motorola Solutions provides, like our CAD system, our command central aware systems, and our evidence management system. So, like I said before, we think of this as not a standalone operation, but think of a CAD dispatcher using the drone as a resource in CAD and dispatching the drone in response to a 911 call for service. And then the drone immediately launches and goes to the scene and gets eyes on the scene. Lastly, I would want to talk about how public safety can come to a successful drone program. The key there is like really defining your goals and desired outcomes, and determining our use cases and missions, right? Think about what you want to come away with this program. Like either it's a reduction in number of calls dispatched, where you dispatch a police officer to a scene, or is it cases that you could have solved if you had aerial intelligence and so on. The next step is really getting your certifications, right? You need to work with the FAA to get a COA if you have to get a Part 107 license for all your pilots, and so on and so forth. There are some steps that we can help public safety agencies to go through to get some of the certifications through our partners. Another key main thing is really to get your community on board, right? Chula Vista has obviously done a great job on this. They did a lot of community outreach. Their whole drone program is very transparent, and they have everything listed on their website. The messaging that has to come out of this is really the drone program is a rapid response tool for public safety, and it's used in response to a 911 call for service. Obviously, you have to select your drone hardware and software to match that go together and see if they can you'll be able to achieve your KPIs or outcomes that you have defined. And then you have to tackle team training and do an initial rollout. Typically, just like Chula Vista started, you start out with one site where you start out your set up the site as a launch point, and then collect KPIs and metrics and see if it provides real value to your operation, and monitor and then expand to other sites, many different sites as applicable. On summary, I'll leave with you as the aerial suite can provide a cost-effective eyes-on-scene video solution. It's safety focused. It's a remote deployment with object detection and collision avoidance techniques that we're working on and it will come in the future. It's regulations compliant. And it's a user interface and experience specifically designed for public safety, and it'll be integrated into our Motorola Solutions mission critical command center workflow. With that, thanks, Justin, and I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next, we're going to kind of look at what Chula Vista is looking for and towards in the future, and we'll leave that over to Don.
Thanks, Justin. So Captain Salih, he kind of gave you the background, kind of where the program is, how it started. and kind of a general overview where Gopal really got into the nuts and bolts of the software. So I'm going to give you an update where we're at currently and how the day-to-day operations unfold. So currently we have 2 launch locations. We launch one drone from the rooftop of our police department, and then we have a second location, which is actually a hospital where we have a release of liability. We went into reached out, made contact with them, and had a partnership with the hospital to allow us daily access to their rooftop for a secondary location. We are currently in negotiations for a third location, which is at our local college. We're actually did an outreach with the college, the students. They have a drone program, so they're interested in also mentoring and working with them for our third location. Even though we're only launching from 2 locations, and as you can see, it's only 33% of our geographical area, it really is the heart of our city. So when you look at the calls for service that we have in these 2 launch locations, it's 70% of our calls for service. Depending on which launch site we go from, we either go, typically the lowest is going to be 150 feet, but regardless of where we launch, our max feet is 400. So our current operations, we are operating 7 days a week. When weather's permitting, we're in San Diego, so we're very fortunate that we really don't get 4 seasons. It's pretty consistent year round. We only work during daytime hours. We are starting to work into the nighttime hours. It's just additional, we need additional manpower for the rooftop for an additional visual observer. All of our pilots are Part 107, even though they're not, we're not required to have Part 107 through our COA. We make sure that we do have all certification pilots are Part 107. The pilot in command, our teleoperator, we have 2 dedicated officers who this is their full-time job. So they work 10-hour shifts. So one works the 3 days. And then they have a barrel where both of them will work together, and then the other one will work the other 3 days, and they kind of rotate, so they're not always working the weekends, but we have 7-day-a-week coverage for all of them. And then the rooftops is staffed by a vendor that we went out for a bid process, and a company came in and they provide the Part 107 pilot and commands the picks on the rooftops. And that's a huge cost savings for us not having to have an officer standing on the rooftop. As Gopal stated, all of our drone flights, they're geofenced, meaning we will not, we cannot fly outside of our city. We have one high-rise that's close to our one of our launch locations. That is geofenced. There's no way that we can fly a drone into that. It's very simple for us to throw up a geofence. There was a company that was doing some building. They put up a large crane. We saw it, and we immediately just geofenced that crane area so that the drone wouldn't fly into it. So we are using the Matrice 210s. We started with the 200s. The 210s, when they came online, we immediately moved over to the 210s. We are looking at the Matrice 300s, and we are in the process of purchasing those, and we will go to the 300s once they're integrated into the aerial suite. Really, this is the heart of the program. Anybody who has in public safety, who has any kind of a UAS program, knows that transparency really and getting that community trust is huge. We constantly field questions from other police agencies wondering how we ever got the community behind us. You know what's in the news these days with surveillance and all these other negative connotations with drones. Before we ever bought a drone, we made sure that we had the support of our community. We did outreach. We did presentations of what our DFR program was going to look like. Additionally, if you log into our our department website, if you just Google Chula Vista Police Department, there is a link to our drone program. If you click on that link, it has basically the history of our DFR program, in addition to a dashboard that is updated every single day. So this dashboard was a snippet from June 12th. And to date, we had 2,655 responses. This is all DFR flights. So when you think about 2,600 flights, those are 2,600 flights of emergencies. So we only launch a Chula Vista Police Department drone if there is an emergency, which we make sure that all of our community members know that if you see a police drone in the air, it is going to or responding back from an emergency. So what's really interesting about this, and you can see the stats there, but we had 2,600 deployments, and on 640 of those deployments, we did not have to send ground units to the scene. And a perfect example, and this is a real life example that one of our drone pilots stated, was we had a liquor store owner called in and said there was a fight in their parking lot. We had no officers available. The drone officer who's actually monitoring 911 calls immediately launched and was overhead in less than 2 minutes. And he was overhead and saw that there was no fight in the parking lot. He picked up the phone, called the store clerk and said, "Hey, this is Officer Smith. I'm a drone pilot with the Chula Vista Police Department. I'm overhead." And he tells the story that he sees the clerk come walking outside with the phone in his hand. He looks up, he sees the drone, he waves to the drone, and he says, "Where's the fight?" And the store clerk says, "Oh, they just left. Everything's fine. We don't need any officers." He said, "Okay," and the clerk waves to the drone, and we responded back to the police department. That was a perfect example of any kind of a fight or anything. We're going to send a minimum of 2 officers, ground unit officers, to that location, and it would have been those are valuable resources that if we're able to get overhead and see whether the fight is still occurring or what the nature of it is, how many people are involved. This is a perfect opportunity for officers to pull over, pull up their cell phones, look at the live feed, see exactly what kind of information, what kind of situation that they're getting into. Additionally, the drone is usually overhead for a lot of our arrests. It comes to the point where a lot of times the officers will ask if the drone is en route, and sometimes I don't want to say slow down, but they want the drone to get in overhead so they can see real time what is occurring at the scene, especially if it's a hot scene, if it's a violent scene. They want to know who are the players involved, and they're able to have a better game plan when they get there. As you can see, we're on scene 112 seconds usually first on scene, and we're averaging 144 seconds just to get to the scene, which is huge for our community and solving crimes. So when you look at the bar graph here, our priority 1 calls, those are life-threatening. When you think of a priority 1 call, that is maybe a shooting, a violent crime that's occurring. A priority 2 call would be something of the nature of a high priority emergency. Maybe it's a fight, maybe it's a domestic violence or something of that nature. You see how long it takes the officers to get on scene. For a priority 2, sometimes it's about 9 minutes. Priority 1 is less than 5 minutes. But then when you add that the drone can be overhead in many times in less than 2 minutes, it's huge because it not only provides that real-time intelligence to the officers that are responding, but it also allows us to see any suspects that may be fleeing, what kind of vehicles they're in. We can actually zoom in with the camera to see license plates, run license plates, and really just multiply the officers that are responding that are needed for this scene. Next slide. So this is going to be, and Justin, you can go ahead and play this. This is the Tamir Rice shooting that happened a few years ago. This is not in any way of us second guessing any agency, but here was a situation, and a very, very unfortunate situation of a juvenile that the 911 caller came in and said that here's a juvenile that's pulling what the caller believed was a gun out of their pocket, out of his pants, and pointing it at people, was scaring people. The caller was unaware of whether this was a real gun or a toy gun. That was not relayed to the officers that were responding to this. Additionally, they didn't know that it was a juvenile. So the officers unfortunately pulled right up to the scene, and within moments, they shot the juvenile, and the juvenile passed away. We had a very similar situation, somewhat similar, in that a call came out of a man with what appeared to be a gun, but it was possibly a lighter, but witnesses were saying it was definitely in the shape of a gun. We were able to launch our drone immediately. We were overhead in less than 2 minutes, 1 minute and 24 seconds. We were overhead. We're able to live stream video of the subject sitting at the bench there with an object that looked to be a gun in their hand, and I'm watching the video now, and it's pretty jumpy, but when you watch it later, you'll see it's pretty smooth. The teleoperator was actually relaying information to the officers. The officers stopped before they got to the scene, parked close by, and were watching the video to see exactly where the subject was sitting, what the object was that was in their hand. As you can see, it does look like a gun. You know, in today's climate, it would be unfortunate if he pointed that object at a police officer and they weren't sure what it was. So the teleoperator, he just continued monitoring this, and then the key to this whole point is when the subject puts this object next to his cigarette and lights his cigarette. So at that point, the teleoperator said it appears that is a lighter, and the officers then moved in and made contact. So this was a perfect example of how having real-time footage above and given this information to the officers ahead of time can potentially de-escalate any situations where force might be needed. So as we progress, we look at this as a crawl, walk, run. We're not crawling, but we're not quite to walking yet. The challenges moving ahead, obviously, is I think we're pushing the envelope as to the abilities of the UASs, the drones in the air. We have applied for a waiver for close proximity, low altitude. Essentially, can we launch a drone that has collision avoidance technology and be able to keep it under 100 feet and go BVLOS? So the idea behind this is if you have an active shooter or somebody who's shooting out a window or something, we'd like to be able to launch a drone to go look around the corner, as opposed to us having to watch the drone the whole time while it's around the corner. We believe that waiver will be coming in the next few days, or hopefully within the next week. We also applied for a 1 to 2 waiver. It started out as a 1 to many, but it's been whittled down to a 1 to 2. So the idea behind this is with the drone technology right now, with the Matrice 210, we're getting about a 20-minute flight time. Sometimes our emergencies, our crime scenes, or the active situation does not end within those 20 minutes. So when we have a drone overhead, the worst feeling for the drone operator is we've got an ongoing situation and we have to return that drone back to base so that we can swap out batteries. The idea behind the 1 to 2 waiver is we launch a secondary drone from the same launch location to replace that drone that's on scene, and then return to home on the original drone that has the low battery. The challenge with this, with the FAA is in theory, the pilot in command is now operating 2 drones, and that's the way they're looking at it. How does the pilot in command operate 2 drones safely? And through the Motorola aerial suite, we point out that it is a return to home button, that the incoming drone is automated, and it's same with the outgoing drone, that we just put a point on the map and the drone will go there automatically. And through the technology, both drones are geofenced from one another so that they will not collide into each other. We feel like we've made a good safety case on that, and we believe that we will have the waiver. We're also, part of that waiver is we're asking for no lat long, meaning we can launch DFR operations from any location in our city. As Captain Sallee stated early on, we have 2 locations now. We are looking at expanding to a 3rd and 4th location and pretty much get 90 to 95% coverage of our city with as little as 4 locations at the current 3-mile BVLOS. We really want it to be more automated in the near future, and this is what we're pushing for. So the idea is maybe that dispatcher gets a hot call, maybe it's a shooting or assault with a deadly weapon, that potentially you can imagine just the dispatcher being able to hit a button, or maybe it's a priority 1 call and it automatically launches the drone to the location that is entered into the CAD screen to make it essentially flawless, that it gets there even quicker than it already is. We are looking the drone to be integrated in all aspects of emergency response. Our fire department, they have access to the aerial suite, so whenever they're responding to a call, maybe it's a fire or a traffic collision, they can actually open up their phones because they have access, and they can look to see what the situation is before they get there. We've launched on a number of residential fires, and have even had the fire department request the drones to go around to see what the fire, how engulfed the house is. So this next video, and you can go ahead and start it, Justin. So this is kind of our close proximity, low altitude example here. We had a situation of a subject that we were looking for. When we talk about the aerial suite, this is how we view it. We do have the Skydio 2, which has the collision avoidance technology, is also integrated into our aerial suite. So essentially an officer can launch the Skydio 2 from the patrol vehicle, and if we wanted to, the teleoperator who is at the police department can take control of the drone and continue to launch. Here's, in this situation, we had both DFR and the tactical drone up. So we had an Overwatch with the Matrice 210, and then we had the tactical drone with the Skydio with the officer on the ground, who was able to actually get inside this area. And anybody who's ever flown a drone, the idea of trying to go down into that area that we're looking at right now would be next to impossible unless you had some sort of collision avoidance. And I'm not here to tell you what drone to buy or what is the best drone out there. This is just the drone that we used during this situation. As you can see, we're able to get in there and look. Again, the public's privacy we take very seriously. If we had no right to be in that backyard, then we would have no right to launch the drone to look around that backyard to see if this armed suspect was there. This was a situation where we were in concern for the community. We really needed to find this dangerous subject. So we didn't want to just be jumping fences and looking around for an armed subject. We would rather have the drone do that for us. You see these wires everywhere. The idea here is that is a challenge for any the best of drone operators. And you can see the DFR there. And I'm going to turn this over to Captain Sallee to talk about Tijuana Police Department.
Thanks, Don. And so, as we close this out, one of the things that we want to emphasize is that DFR really is a new paradigm in policing, and it is scalable, and it has already been reproduced, and not just in the States by a couple agencies. Redondo Beach and Clovis PD have also stood up DFR programs with Motorola. But our sister agency to the south in Mexico, about 10 miles away from us, TJPD, visited us last year and decided to replicate our operations. Since June of last year, they've flown 400 DFR hours and 1,500 missions from a single site. At that time, they were ahead of us, and they'd been doing it for half the amount of time. They had already attributed 80 arrests to the program. They do it differently because clearly they have different privacy issues in Mexico. They use them proactively to target hotspots, and they actually do use drones to surveil problem areas and proactively patrol. We do not proactively patrol with drones. We only respond to emergency calls for service, and we don't use them for any kind of general surveillance. That's a huge concern and issue that agencies must concern themselves with and ensure your policies prohibit surveillance and general patrol, as well as arming drones. The public has all kinds of questions and concerns, and we in order to make sure drones are seen for the really good tool that they are, we need to have really strong policies in place to protect privacy. So in TJ, they want to scale their program to 8 launch sites as well, so which would cover about half of their city's districts. So again, you can start small with 1 site and expand as capabilities present themselves. And we see this going hopefully nationally and internationally to agencies that could never afford a manned helicopter, but they will be able to use drones, and it will have a major impact on public safety going into the future.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Before we get into the questions here, a lot of you probably already know FLYMOTION, but we're a technology provider, and we also do a lot of public safety and training on drone use. And this is a program that we really admire and something that we'd love to help champion throughout law enforcement in the U.S. And so if you guys have any questions about aircraft or training or how to set up a program like this, just let us know. Reach out to us. We'd love to get you in touch with these guys, Gopal as well over at Motorola, and see how we can assist you in starting a program like this. Gentlemen, a few questions we had, and you touched on this first one. What was the process for training your non-UAS patrol staff to act as a VO? I know you talked a little bit about the third party that came in and helped with that. Would you mind just expanding a little bit on that?
Don, would you like to cover that part?
Yep. So we go in, roll call. It's about 15 minutes. It's just a quick PowerPoint, basically reminding everybody about our program, the DFR program. So every 6 months we rotate our shifts. So we may have officers who have never worked during the daylight. Maybe they've always worked graveyard shifts or something. So they don't have the interaction with the drone as the DFR. So we'll go in there, spend about 15 minutes going over what DFR is and some of the idea or the limitations that we have in flying the drone. What we can do, obviously, weather plays a big factor, when they can ask for it, when we'll be up and running. But more importantly, that whenever they see aircraft in the air, especially when I say aircraft in the air, obviously low flying aircraft, they need to be proactive and notify our UAS operator that maybe there's a low flying military helicopter in the north end of the city, just to bring it to their attention that there is an aircraft in the airspace. It's just the constant reminder every 6 months of all of our officers that, hey, we are flying a drone in the air in the same airspace that we have manned aircraft, and the last thing we ever want to do is have a collision.
And that kind of segues into our next question, actually. Do you constantly communicate with air traffic control while launching?
So no, we do not. So we typically, I have done, reached out to, we have 2 helicopters, the San Diego Sheriff's Department and San Diego Police Department, who have police helicopters, that they're really, for the most part, the only ones that will ever fly over our city. I've given the presentation to them and explained to them that, hey, we have a max height of 400 feet. So please, when you're in our city, if you're going to drop below 400 feet, make sure that we're aware of it. If they're in our city, the understanding is we'll be aware of it for the most part, because we've probably called them in for mutual aid. So if we know that one of the police helicopters is coming, we will automatically return to home, and we will stand down our UAS program while the helicopters in the air. But at the same point, we have flown it. The helicopter pilots feel comfortable enough with our drones. They've actually told us, nope, we're good. We see where it's at. If you guys stay right where you're at, we're good here.
Awesome. One question for maybe Gopal here and the other two as well. Does the software allow the drones to still use their own collision avoidance capabilities, or does it strictly rely on the geofencing?
No, the software allows the drone to use its own collision avoidance capabilities. Yeah, so the geofence acts as an additional layer, if you will, right? We closely integrate with the drone manufacturers' SDKs and work with them to bring about our solution.
One person asked, have you looked into integrating hybrid drones such as Harris Aerials, maybe some hybrids that give you 2 to 2.5 hours of flight time?
Again, we just acquired the technology in the last year, and right now we haven't gotten a request to integrate into the drones that the questioner is talking about. That's something it could be a possibility in the future, right? But we are really, I guess, evaluating a lot of drone vendors for the feasibility towards being a DFR type drone. We have a short list, and we don't have any hybrid drones in that list at this moment.
To add to that, yeah, there are a lot of drones that are great in one area and maybe not in another. So we're limited to launch locations. Obviously, we don't want to be fueling up aircrafts to launch. So those longer ones, sometimes they're gas powered. So just where we currently, not to say that the Matrice 210 is the best drone in the world, it probably is not. I don't know all the drones, but it just for DFR, it seems to be working the best at this moment.
How many other agencies across the U.S. are using this program or starting to use this program?
That number is confidential, but the number is not crazy big, but it's small and it's growing.
Perfect, thank you. A couple more questions here, and then we're going to run out of time. How do you boost your signal? How do you prevent the loss of the drone signal?
We don't boost the signal now, and again, it's the signal is provided by. We are using drones out of the box, right? The solution that we have is a software-only solution.
Yeah, and that was the big issue when we went to 3 nautical miles. The Matrice 200 really was struggling at that distance, but with the 210, we were able to fly to 3 nautical miles. But even at the 3-mile mark, we struggle with maintaining that connection.
Okay. Right, and just to add to that, right, there are some of the drone vendors are trying to integrate LTE technology into the drone. So that could be a avenue in the future where the network connection between the drone and the remote control can be as big as you can think of, and the limitation is only the battery or the flight time that's available to the drone. Again, there are a lot of regulations as well around it. Today, you cannot use LTE for that purpose, but in the future, we see that this limitation wouldn't be a big factor in drone deployments.
For Don and Vern, are you considering expanding operation hours to nighttime, and what are the obstructions lying in front of you to do that?
Don, I can take this one. So yes, we have done some nighttime operations, as well as actually integrating with the fire department during our normal operations. And one of the things, as Don had mentioned, we take the crawl, walk, run approach. So we want to make sure that we master all aspects of operations in one environment before we move into another one. So we've only dipped our toes into night ops. The first goal was to get to 7 days a week, which was we started on January 1st of this year. My next goal is to get full city coverage for 70 hours a week, 7 days a week. And then my goal after that is to have the full city coverage, if not 24 hours, at least into the night, depending on where our calls for service are. A big limitation is, first working with the FAA to get the expanding the areas that we can launch from. So that's a process. Because we're in the FAA's integration pilot program, we do essentially have kind of front of line privileges, but it still takes a lot of time for them to assess the flight safety standards of we're pushing envelopes here, and we're pushing the FAA past their comfort level, right? So it takes some time. So that's a limitation. And honestly, finances are a pretty huge limitation, especially in this environment. COVID's changed, upended the world, and certainly has upended the world in municipal governments in terms of budgets. This entire program is not a budgeted item in the police department's budget. We've been funding it via grants and salary savings. So that's a huge challenge. But, we really, after more than 2,600 flights, and we only, really showed a couple videos because we do hold videos as evidence, and they're not really, public until the calls are resolved in terms of the cases are resolved. But we've seen in dozens, if not hundreds of cases where we actually bend the curve in favor of our police officers and the outcome of the call. We have better outcomes on our calls and bring suspects into custody safely with DFR. And so, one of the phrases we like to say is that it makes our communities safer, it makes police officers safer, but it even makes suspects safer because when we have the right information and intelligence going into the call, we bring the right tools, resources to bear, and we have better outcomes.
Awesome. I know you mentioned the FFA there. One question did come across. What class airspace are you operating in? And if a city is in a more regulated airspace, will that affect the DFR?
Yeah, so almost all of Chula Vista's Class G airspace. We really are fortunate on a lot of areas. We have Lindbergh Field, which is the main international airport, but that's quite a ways away. We have a couple naval bases and airfields nearby, but no airfields in the 52 square mile city. So that means almost all air traffic is well above our operational height, with the exception of emergency type manned helicopters. And like Don said, we communicate with them. And just to follow up on the earlier question with communication with all the air traffic control, we do have NOTAMs filed on a daily basis with the air traffic control towers. And so anybody flying in our airspace is aware of our operations. And again, as Don said, we have a culture of safety. We have visual observers, not just the pick on the roof, but every officer is trained to keep an eye on the area that we're operating in during a flight, so that we can return to base or take appropriate action should we have any type of airspace conflict. We will always give way to manned aircraft.
Understood. Two more questions here, and then we'll end the webinar. One, I think I can help answer, hopefully. Says, have you ever considered using the Autel Robotics Evo 2 platform due to the increased flight times and higher resolution of the visual light and thermal capabilities? The M300 that just came out, built by DJI, which I believe is going to be integrated into the aerial suite program soon, has a flight time of close to 50 minutes. With a payload, you're looking at probably 45 minutes. And the thermal sensor on that, as well as laser range finding and tracking, it is what I would say is probably the best drone that has come out for something like this. Plenty of videos on our YouTube about the capabilities of that drone. That would be my suggestion for better flight times. What do you guys think?
We are like drone agnostic, right? I mean, the list of drones that, of course, that we can integrate is limited because of resources and everything. And we are driven by customer choice. So right now, we have a list that I can share right now, but it will be, again, due to COVID, it's a lot of things have slightly slowed down on RN2, but in a few months, we'll be publishing the list of drones we support and the level of support and so on.
Yeah, and just to piggyback with what Gopal said, we really are drone agnostic. We, in a lot of ways, our program is ahead of the technology, which is, a really strange place to be. So we're eagerly awaiting the integration of new drones into the Motorola aerial suite, because what fits Chula Vista might not fit another city, and so we're looking forward to seeing what others do. We don't pretend our program is perfect. It was developed for our city, and other cities might be might look different, or other use cases might look different, but it really has been impactful to our operations.
And last question here before we go, do you often receive records requests for drone video? And if so, have you had to add additional staffing to fulfill these requests?
So we do not typically receive them, and if we do receive them, we deny them, because the video that we take is all evidentiary. We're responding to emergency calls. We're not randomly patrolling or surveilling, and we respect our citizens' right to privacy. I mean, we recognize, when the drone's flying over, it's going to incidentally capture, a variety of things, and we treat it essentially like our body-worn camera video, which we also do not publicly release. That being said, there are some state laws that would now permit the release of video if it were, for instance, a critical incident where an officer used force, such as an officer-involved shooting. That would fall under state law requiring us to release that, along with body-worn camera video and other substantial evidence within a preset amount of time after the incident for public review.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you everybody so much for joining us. If you have any questions for anybody on this webinar, please reach out. If you don't have their emails, just email us at sales@flymotionus.com and I'll put you in touch. This will be on our YouTube, and thank you so much, Don, Vern, and Gopal, for joining us, and hope you all have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Bye.
Thank you.